So here we are once again on Tisha B'Av, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, the day when we mourn Jewish destruction, Jewish exile, not a positive day in any way, shape, or form. And we can look at the present state of the Jewish people today, and the way that we understand it is everything difficult that the Jewish people are dealing with is a result of the fact that we've been in exile for 2,000 years, that we haven't had our temple in Israel, that we've been scattered throughout the world. Yes, in many ways, things have gotten better for us. We have half of the world's Jewish population living in Israel. But that comes with so many challenges, as we know. First of all, the challenges from without, the Muslim world, which is still threatening to destroy the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And the threats from within, if you follow Israeli news, where it's literally Jew fighting Jew. That's what it is when there's conflict in the land of Israel. And let me tell you why this really scares me here on Tisha B'Av. It's because we have to look at the source of this all. Our sages tell us that the Second Temple was destroyed because of sinas chinam, baseless hatred from one Jew to another. What does that mean? That didn't mean that people didn't have reasons for their conflict. No, you always have a reason for your conflict. But the fact that that conflict led to hatred, that was baseless. And the Talmud tells us that every generation that doesn't rebuild the temple, it's as if we destroyed it. And in many ways, we still have the same problems going on today that we had 2,000 years ago when the temple was destroyed. So that's clearly why the temple hasn't been rebuilt, and dare I say it threatens the present state of the Jewish people. I mean, think about this for a minute. The Talmud Yerushalmi tells us that before the destruction of the Second Temple, there was tremendous sectarianism within the Jewish people in Israel. There were 24 different competing groups within the land of Israel. That's worse than the Knesset today. And they would fight, and they would fight, and they would fight for power, and they would fight each other. So that's what destroyed the Jewish people in Israel. The Romans were a secondary problem. The Romans just, so to speak, came in to clean up the mess after the civil war, the civil strife with the Jews fighting one another. And we look at the present state in Israel today, and you have the fights over, I don't even want to get into it on Tisha B'Av, judicial revision, judicial review, these people go into the army, not go into the army, and it's fighting, and unfortunately it's gotten to the point of bloodshed, one Jew to another. One group will protest and they'll get beat up by the police. Do you think that the Almighty is looking down at this situation and saying, okay, these are the people I'm going to let the third temple be built for? Yet we don't even stop to think about it. And what's the problem? How does it escalate? How do Jews who have a dispute over something, or they don't agree on something, how does that lead to Jewish bloodshed, protests, and Jews beating up Jews in the streets of Israel? How does it escalate to that point? My friends, I believe it escalates because in the world today, we think we're 100% right, no matter what it is, no matter what side we're on. We live in echo chambers. We can't even hear the other side. We can't even discuss the other side. God forbid even come to a compromise with the other side. And I'm not saying in any of these conflicts one side's right and one side's wrong, one side has a better position, one side has a worse position. I'm not even going there. I'm going at the fact that we can't even sit at the table and find a solution. We can't even consider that maybe the other side has merit. Maybe the other side, there's something there. Maybe we should be talking as opposed to protesting and fighting. And ultimately, I believe that's what the Almighty wants from us. So let me tell you a few stories just to bring this point home here on Tisha B'Av. First is one of my favorite stories of all time. It's about Rav Aryeh Levin. Now, Rav Aryeh Levin was a saintly rabbi before the modern-day state of Israel who lived in Israel and was known as the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, the righteous Jew of Jerusalem. For many different reasons. He would visit Jews who were in prison. He would take care of the downtrodden. He really just cared endlessly for every single Jew. So he heard about a store that was often open on Shabbos. It didn't close before sunset leading into Shabbos. And many of the people in Jerusalem were outraged that a Jewish store was opened on Shabbos in Jerusalem. And they asked Rabbi Levin to intercede, to try and speak to the store owner to do something. So what does Rabbi Levin do? He doesn't go outside the store and protest. He doesn't throw rocks at the store owner when he walks outside. He doesn't do any of that. You know what he does? On Friday afternoon, an hour before sunset, when most people are getting ready for Shabbos, they're home, taking their showers, getting dressed, whatever it is, he gets ready for Shabbos early this week, puts on his Shabbos clothes, and goes to the store. And he takes a chair in the back of the store, and he just sits there, watching the hustle and the bustle and how the store's still open, and people are coming in and people are coming out. And he just sits there. And the owner, of course, knows who Rabbi Levin is, and he takes notice of the saintly rabbi and is very uncomfortable with the fact that here it's, 45 minutes before Shabbos, 30 minutes before Shabbos, 15 minutes before Shabbos, and the saintly rabbi is just sitting there in the back of his store observing everything that's going on. Finally, it's just about Shabbos, and the owner comes up to him and says, "Rabbi, it's almost Shabbos. What are you doing here in my store?" And he said to the owner, he said, "I figured if a Jewish person in Jerusalem was keeping their store open on Shabbos, there must be a good reason. And therefore, I wanted to understand the nisayon, the test, the struggle that you have that forces you to keep your store open on Shabbos." The owner of the store started crying. He said, "Rabbi, everyone else was threatening me, saying they wouldn't shop in my store, giving me a hard time. You actually took the time to understand my position. I'm closing the store right now." And the man never opened the store again on Shabbos from that day forward. He was always careful to close the store before Shabbos began. That's how you deal with someone you have a dispute with. You don't assume that you're right and protest and throw rocks and stones and fight to beat people up. No, that's not how you do it. You try to understand where they're coming from. And when you make that attempt to understand where the other person is coming from, that's when you can finally get to the point of a resolution. That's story number one. Story number two. Also a little bit of a dated story because it deals when we used to have these things called newspapers in the world. Anyone my age or older still knows what a newspaper is. If you're younger than me, you might not. Newspapers were these things that used to offer the news to individuals who wanted to know what was going on in the world. And they were printed on this paper, thrown onto your doorstep in the morning, and people used to love to read their newspapers. I don't think they do anymore, but they used to love their newspapers. Nice, fresh newspaper. There was a geschmack, there was a deliciousness, and taking out the fresh newspaper and reading it every day. So there was a man who had his newspaper subscription, and he realized after a while that when he would go to get his newspaper and read it, it didn't have that fresh crispness to it as it usually had. It looked like someone had been reading his newspaper before it got to his house. So the subscriber, curious as to what was going on, started getting up earlier and earlier, trying to figure out what was happening with his newspaper. And then he saw what was going on. His neighbor was getting up even earlier than him, coming to his house, reading his newspaper, folding it back up, putting it back in the bag, and putting it on his doorstep before the man ever woke up. So he confronts his neighbor. He says, "Neighbor, why are you reading my newspaper?" He says, "What do you mean? I read it before you get up? I got it back on your doorstep before you even come out to get it? Right? I'm able to benefit, doesn't take away from you." No. You don't get it. You're reading my newspaper before me. I don't get that crisp, delicious newspaper. And the whole thing started to lead to a fight over this newspaper. So the man, the one who subscribed to the paper, went to ask his rabbi, "What do I do? My neighbor's taking my paper, he's stealing from me." Yeah, he puts it back, but it's already like a used newspaper at that point, which anyone ever read a newspaper knows you don't want to read a used newspaper. This is what his rabbi told him to do. He said, "You should buy your neighbor his own subscription to the newspaper." I should buy my neighbor who's been stealing my newspaper subscription to the news? Well, he's taking my paper, he should buy me a subscription. Why should I buy him a subscription? To which the rabbi said, "My son, you use money on Lulav and Esrog and Shabbos and all kinds of mitzvahs you use your money for. You build a sukkah, Pesach, right? Many mitzvahs cost money. Shalom is also a mitzvah. So why wouldn't you invest in having shalom with your neighbor? What is it, $50 a year, $100 a year? You probably spend more than that on your esrog. You're not going to invest in the mitzvah of shalom? To this end, my friends, we should all have a shalom fund. Because we all know that when we say it's not about the money, it's always about the money. And we should have that money set aside that when we have these little skirmishes with people, over $50, $100, $200, whatever it is, we spend that much money on our matzahs, we spend that much money on our lulav and esrog, why wouldn't we spend that money on the mitzvah of shalom? So we should have money in our shalom fund so that when these little conflicts come up, we just say, you know what? It's okay. Don't need it. Do your own thing. That's story number 2. Now let me give you story number 3. I recently heard this from my dear friend, Rabbi Yaakov Robinson in Chicago, Illinois, the Rav of Beis Medrash Makor HaChaim. He told a story that he likes to speak to the families before bar mitzvah and to hear just some of the family history and the family lore. There was a family that had this story that happened to their antecedents before they came to America. Their grandfather was a jeweler in Europe before the Nazis came. And as the Nazis were getting closer and closer, he knew that he wasn't going to be able to hold on to his wealth. He knew what was coming. He figured he would at least want to try and do something with all his gold and silver and jewels to try and preserve it if he would survive the war, that maybe he could come back for it. But what would he do? Dig another hole to put it in? The Nazis would for sure find that. Here's what he did with his gold and his jewelry. He melted it all down. And out of the melted metal, he made this what looked like a broken down oven. That's what he formed it into. And he was able to put all the golden jewelry inside of this broken down oven. He painted it black. He puts in the basement to look exactly like a broken down oven. Sure enough, this man survived the war. He was able to come back to the house after the war, knocked on the door. Again, the neighbors, the evil people came in and stole his house. He said, I don't want the house. I don't want the house back. I just want the old broken down oven in the basement if it's still there. And sure enough, the old broken down oven was still there in the basement. Sometimes, my friends, we think we understand something. We see something, we think it's an old broken down oven. It's worthless, it's meaningless. And that could be something that you rebuild your fortune with, just if you scratch off some of the paint, just if you look below the surface. On this Tisha B'Av, let's let this all resonate with us. Please let this resonate with us. That the Jewish people are in this situation we're in because of baseless hatred one Jew to another. Yet we all, at some level, still practice that every single day. Let's try and be like Rabbi Levin, to really go out of our way to understand what the other person is going through, to understand what the other person is dealing with. And sometimes when necessary, let's take money out of our pocket to avoid a fight, to make sure that fight doesn't happen. And let's remember that something that looks like a broken down oven, a worthless broken down oven, might be the thing that helps us rebuild our fortune, and might be the thing that helps the Jewish people get to where we need to get to, and might be that thing that gives us our personal salvation. And God willing, if we as individuals can take this approach, if we can make this difference, we'll inspire others, and those others will inspire others, and God willing, that'll get to the Jewish people to the point where we're not fighting in the streets, where we're not arguing with each other, where we're not in strife with others, that we're a united Jewish people. We're a Jewish people that's truly together. And the Almighty will look down and say, these are the people that I'm going to redeem. These are the people that I'm going to build the third temple for. And we should all see it happen speedily in our days. Thank you for listening.